This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Shaun Cole, and today we're here checking out the Delanclip Fusion Pro. Now, you might be looking at that and thinking that doesn't look like sim racing gear, and it isn't necessarily typical sim racing gear. This is a head tracking unit. So we've heard of various different tracking methods. There's eye tracking, there's face tracking, there's head tracking, and in this particular case, it's actually infrared tracking. So I tested something like this back, oh gosh, it was over 10 years ago. I played with the Track IR and I was fascinated with its concept.
The heart of the natural point Track IR is this little bugger right here. You put it up on your monitor and it'll track your head movement.
And there are circumstances that it worked great, and there are other circumstances that it wasn't necessarily optimal. So I kind of shelved it. But here we are a decade later trying out a new twist on the same concept. And what you have here is 6 degrees of freedom. I'm not sure if it's freedom if we're talking about tracking versus motion simulators, but it's tracking 6 different axes of your head's movement, that being yaw, pitch, roll, X, Y, and Z axis. The Fusion Pro kit goes for 110 British pounds, which is $139 in the United States, and it comes with a couple of main components. First, you have the camera. You can see it's a 3D printed case, and it looks like a super duper fancy web camera. It's actually infrared, so you're going to get no imagery off of it. And then you got the clip itself with 3 infrared lights. This is a wireless unit. It's actually very lightweight, and it'll wireless charge for up to 16 hours of use, which is pretty cool. And it is also 3D printed. So it all starts with getting all this hardware mounted on our computer, well, on our monitor, just like a webcam, and on our headphones. So we're gonna mount this to our headphones, download some software, and get this up and running and see how it works in-game. The setup was really basic and easy to do. First, we just installed a little USB adapter thing into the clip itself, and then we use Velcro pads on the clip and on the side of our headphones to get it mounted on as vertically as possible. Then we'll just plug this in with the cool magnetic charger and get it all charged up for when we're ready. Now we're going to mount the camera. It comes with some Velcros and a cool little mount. And when mounting, you want to make sure that you have it perfectly in front of the clip, the LED lights, not centered like a webcam. Next, we'll download and install the software, and then we can just start tracking. And you can see the little octopus following my every movement of my head, up, down, left, right, twisting any direction that I move it. So basically, it was plug and play, and it worked right out of the box just like that. But now we could actually get down to some testing. All right, we have this all set up, ready to go. You know me, I got to start things off with some iRacing. So I'm in the car, and the movement is all over the place, but I got to tell you, I'm not even in the right spot of the car. So we're going to, first things first, have to find a center. I remember from the past, I'd have something mapped to center the control. So, oh, here we go. Yep, under shortcuts, we can bind this button. There we go. Okay, now our head is where we belong in the car, and I'm just looking around, and right there you got that pillar that blocks your view on the right hand side. So when I look right, I'm pretty obstructed. I'm in the Dallara P217. Look at, oh wow, I can stick my head out the car. We are way outside of the car. I don't know if that's kind of crazy. I can, oh my God, I can get all the way up on the steering wheel, all the way back. This is a lot of movement. Okay, all right, let's get going. Let's go. We are in the car, people. It's a lot like VR, right? In that you feel like you're in the car with the way it just, when you move, you move. Wherever you move, up, down, left, right, it just, wow. Okay, so now I'm turning in for the apex, and I'm turning my head and looking to the corner, and the whole view is panning around any direction. It's not just left and right. Oh, wow, okay. This is going to take some getting used to for sure. Cruising along. This is a trip. It's, again, as I was saying, it's like you're in VR in that you're so linked with your head movement to where the view changes. But it's different because I'm still looking at monitors. I still see all of the outside obstructions, or distractions of my room. I see my steering wheel and my display as well. So visibility It's like conventional monitors, because we're still using the conventional monitors, obviously, but we are have that in the car feeling like VR. Oh, wow, this is a lot of movement. So right now in a car, you know, I'd be strapped down with belts. I'd have a helmet on. I'd have a Hans device on. And I would not be able to move. Like, right, I'm putting my head out the window of the car. And that's just crazy. And, oh, we're going to almost crashed because of it. It's hard to drive when your head is out the window. Your perspective is totally different. And yeah, so I think this is a bit wild and crazy. I love the action, I love the movement, but I need much, much less. This is undrivable. It's funny, it's entertaining, but it's far, far too much. Oh, wait, yeah, and it's a little weird because I'm like looking the wrong direction. If it goes too far, it's like even more than I would turn my head naturally. So I think the first things first, we're gonna have to do some setting adjustment and get it to be a little more realistic, like we're in a car driving it. Out of the box, the Delanclip did totally work, but I did find it to be a little bit erratic and a little out of control. So I watched some videos from their website on doing some fine tuning, and I made some adjustments, starting with the clip itself. I decided it was really important that that clip be as vertical and perfectly up and down orientation as I can get it onto the headphones, which my headphones are a little rounded. So I spent a little time getting it as good as I possibly could get it, and then I went back into the software and actually calibrated the unit where it would make some other adjustments to compensate for a little bit of offness. And then I went to work with some tuning on the sensitivity. So we have 6 degrees of axis of motion. Now you got to think about it. Some of these were too far, farther than I needed them to be, or farther than are even realistic in a race car condition. So I started tuning in the sensitivities, turning them down for the most part, and in some cases even turning them off. I kind of took the approach of dialing in force feedback, where sometimes you want to turn certain effects off so you can focus on other things. So for example, if the only movement I'm tracking is left to right, I can tune it to the exact amount of movement that I want, and then turn on another action and tune in that sensitivity as well. This got it much more realistic to using in a real-life race car situation. All right, back to iRacing. Let's try this again. So I went through the settings and I just got it right. I thought I was going to turn some movements off because I was like, well, do you really move your head like that in a car? No. And in the end, just by turning down the range of motion, I was able to control things. Now I have it down to what I think is a real good drivable amount. And it still allows me to fully turn to the full range in the game. It's slowed it down. Now it's controllable. So when I'm moving my head, the movements are a lot less and a lot more within the range of what I feel like I would do as a real driver. So now as I'm turning for apex, yes, it turns, but I've maintained enough view to continue driving in the proper orientation versus trying to turn with your head completely turned right or left. So I still have that grooviness, that fun of being in the car, that virtual cockpit. I mean, the immersion level just jumps up a ton because now I'm attached. And I know a lot of games have tried like artificial head movement where it's tied to your steering wheel, and that feels goofy, and I always turn that off right away. And then VR, it's certainly optimal because your view is changing so one-to-one with your head. This is sort of halfway in between. Now, I will say this. In a real race car, I'm all eyes. I mean, yes, my head will tilt if you put a camera on me. But like in an open wheeler, you'll feel the wind tug on your head if you turn it too much because your head becomes a little wing for the wind. In a closed car, that's not going to be the factor, but I do find that with all the belts and the Hans device, that my head movement is so minimized. So I've tried to kind of mimic that, but maybe a little bit more extreme so I can see a lot more around. And it is just, it's hard to describe. I mean, I hope it translates in seeing the in-car shots of how it moves. But I actually find to get the best results is when I actually stop thinking about it. So right now, I'm gonna not think about the unit. I'm not gonna think about turning my head with intention. Like if a car was on my right, I could turn my head and look at them. I only need to turn that much, by the way. But for general like hot lapping sessions, I think it's most important to just do your thing. Just drive the way you normally do. And what you'll notice if you watch the replay footage or if you actually look at it is that you do move your head more than you think you do. So even though we're using our eyes so much looking to apex, we definitely are turning our head slightly at the same time. Turn your eyes and your head will follow. So it is a trip, but I do find like when I'm going for apexes, I can turn and look at the apex and it gives me a great visibility for the apex. Unfortunately, I don't find that I retract quite as fast. So I do find that I drive off the corners wide. I do a much better job on entry and maybe with more time, I'll get even more used to it and that won't be the case. But if you compared this to a fixed view, there is no comparison. It is linked to my movement. It is linked to my body English, good and bad in this case, because if I start tilting my head, I'll start getting a tilting effect on the screen as well, which is a little bit odd. So in iRacing with it dialed in, I find it to be really enjoyable, but I do wonder how long it would take to get to where I'm driving perfectly. I think what happens is I'm under braking, I start tensing up, I crunch down, looking to apex, and then I let my eyes drift out, but then the view doesn't happen with it. So I find that I'm a lot slower to retract my head than I am turning it on initial turn-in. And for me, since iRacing is primarily my racing sim, I find that I do need absolute perfection. It might even be why I haven't converted to VR, because as desirable as it is in so many ways, I wasn't able to get the perfection that I could with fixed monitors. And as cool as this is, and as in the cockpit and as immersive as it is, the end result might be slightly off of perfection, and that's just not going to do it for my racing sim. Well, by the time I tried Assetto Corsa, I'd already learned enough things about needing to adjust some sensitivity and getting the calibration all dialed in, and I actually found the results to be very similar to what I experienced in iRacing. And then I tried a few other sims, and basically, if the game allows you to map a control to head movement, then chances are this is going to work. It pretty much works in just about any and every game that I tried. And again, the results were the same. And I think it comes down to this. If I were going to spend a long time, like very dedicated to using the Delanclip, I'm going to be able to get its sensitivity just right for the car and the driving experience I want. I'm also going to be able to get it to where I've trained myself. I feel like there is a little learning curve and a little training hump to getting comfortable with it. Because again, are you leading with your head? Are you leading with your eyes? Are you making the full return getting out of corners? And when you really get it nailed down, it is quite remarkable, because again, it reminds me so much of being in VR without the downside. I mean, I have no frame rate hit at all. So this isn't costing me any frame rate on the driving experience, which means I don't need to upgrade my computer, versus when I'm thinking about the more modern VR units that I want to try out, I literally need to buy a new computer to be able to use them at their potential. And using VR in yesteryear's technology just wasn't good enough to get me to switch over. If you're racing for tenths of seconds against your friends, your league members for points on iRacing, you're going to have to weigh the benefits. For me, I still feel, whether we're talking Assetto Corsa Competizione here or iRacing, that the fun factor is through the roof. The immersion is through the roof. The driving experience is through the roof. But racing for seconds, I still feel like I might be just a teeny tiny bit off. And so then you have to weigh it for yourself. If it's all about victories, if it's all about trophies, well, if it doesn't make you faster, it's probably not for you. But if you're about the driving experience, if you're about hearing this beautiful Ferrari that I'm driving right here, then it is going to increase the experience of driving that car. And I think getting into, like, even now I'm switching sims in my mind again, getting into like a BeamNG where you have a lot of civilian cars, or maybe in like a mud runner, snow runner type game where you're looking around and you're doing off-road at slow speeds. It's going to be totally awesome. But maybe in a performance car, it loses its effectiveness or certainly its perfection. So I think next we're going to do exactly that. It's time to fire up some Truck Simulator and see how it works in the big old 18-wheelers. All right, now we're in ATS, and you can see I got the big wheel on here. I didn't remount it for this shot here, but on all my testing, I actually put it in the proper trucking position. But, you know, here we are in a big truck, and we'd have a single strap seatbelt, no helmet, no Hans, right? We're going slow. We're cruising 55, 65 miles an hour. And you know what? Part of trucking, I mean, one of the beauties, I think, of being a trucker is just taking in the scenery, being able to look around, being able to check over your shoulder, look in your mirrors with total comfort and freedom. And you know, I did have to get the sensitivity just right. You want it so when you're looking at the edge of your screen, that's as far as you want to be able to turn, right? You don't want to have to turn all the way there. And when I got things just right, I could just cruise down the highway in this big truck, looking around, see cars, look down on the cars beside me as they're going by, look back, keep my eyes on the road, of course, and check out the beautiful state of California as I'm cruising down the highway here. And even more importantly, when you get to things like, so let's see here, we're going to pull off the highway here and get onto a side street. And you know, so right now, just looking to clear traffic. Is there traffic? Nope, we're clear. We can just pull on out. And while I had those mapped to the wheel and they did work well enough, or you could use your mouse, it's always awkward. You're using either a whole hand to reach over for the mouse, or you're using a thumb to do it, and maybe it's not as precise, and it's certainly not natural. So with that stop right there, I was able to look left, look right, check traffic, and then pull out. Or when we get into the yard and we're going to start maneuvering, sometimes you need to be able to look at the left mirror. You need to be able to look over at that right mirror. We're going to put it into reverse, and we're going to try backing this sucker up. And we can very accurately double check both mirrors and do it very quickly, by the way. And then if we need to pull forward, we're right back to forward. So I would almost put this, when it comes to ATS or Euro Truck or any kind of bus simulator, I would actually put this into that must-buy category. Like it is increasing the amount of fun of this game tenfold. And when I think about the money invested, if you're going to spend hours driving, you're just going to enjoy every mile on the road better in the truck sims or the bus sims for sure. I would definitely recommend using this. All right, next up is flight sims, and I just know it's going to work out even better than it did here in the trucks. All right, so our final test of the day is going to be Flight Simulator, and to an extent for this product, I think I saved the best for last because I feel like this is almost what the Delanclip was really made for. This is just such a natural feeling. So I'm just sitting in a Cessna on the runway ready to take off right now, and you know, most things will be mapped to your controller, sure. But sometimes in Flight Sim, you find that you don't have something mapped, but it's a control that's on the dashboard, and you always have that mouse hover over ability, but it's hard to do that while looking around unless you have the Delanclip. So if I want to reach down and grab my throttle, for example, I can just do so, and it works just like that, which is really cool and nice. So the other thing, again, the natural part, I mean, this is the only version where I can sit here and look at the camera while operating the game, whether we're talking Euro Truck or any of the racing sims. We end up having to keep our eyes on the road or we're going to crash. In an airplane, once you get to a decent elevation, looking around is part of flying. So as I'm sitting here near San Francisco and I can look out under my left wing there, I see some of the other taxiing airplanes going out. As I go down the runway, I'm in the air, just kind of going down the line of the runway, just kind of taking a look around, and the movement is seamless, and all those movements that we saw before in the race car are even more perfect. So if I need to look in on my navigation system, I can get a really good close look up versus trying to read the gauges from back here. And in doing so, unlike driving a car, I'm not constantly making alterations to my flying line. We're just cruising along. And then even if we're going to dip over and make a right turn now that we're on the runway, we can look out that right side of the window so nicely, have a great view of what's going on. And we can even look back while turning, the way it works with a plane versus a car. And it just, again, it feels so natural. And that's why I say I almost feel like this product was made for flight sims, DCS, flight sim, all your flying games. And then it just happens to work for shooters, and it happens to work for racing. But I feel this is its real true purpose and best application. And it is the kind of thing, like, I do a lot of flight sim for fun. I don't do it, for the show. I do it for fun, just one of my personal things that I like doing. And the amount of fun of doing this, it's almost like, I honestly would put it as a must-buy. If you can't afford VR, which VR and flight sim is awesome, if you can't afford VR, then you have to have this if you're an avid flyer. It just makes such a difference. It makes lining up the runway. Right now I'm coming in for a real short landing. I'm going to look down and turn down my throttle. I don't, for some reason, have it mapped. And we're going to be able to just bring this thing right in ever so nicely. A little more increase of the throttle. There we go. I wish I had it mapped. I mean, right now it kind of makes my point even better, being able to look down and use the hover. And it's such a great feeling. It is the perfect application. It's real smooth in its transitions. I can look everywhere in the cockpit, and it just makes flying so natural. When you're swerving between buildings or obstacles, you can look up or look around and make sure they're around. If we're going to try formation flying, we could actually look out and see the wingtip of the plane next to us, and it is really, really fun and makes flight sim so much better. So again, if you're a flight simmer and a racer, I'm going to say, hey, get it. You're going to use it on flight sim every time you use it. You're going to use it on racing sims when you feel it's applicable. It'll be fun sometimes. It'll be for purpose at other times. But absolutely, I would never fly without it at this point. That's for sure. Now, I did all of my testing in all of the games and sims on my double wide monitor, which is an interesting way to test it. It's 2 monitors wide. I found for triple screens, in sim racing in particular, that I had enough view that it was really a little bit minimized how effective the Delanclip would actually be. In my double wide, I found it to be a lot more advantageous. But then I did something just to remind myself of how things used to be, and I actually put it in a single monitor mode. So running at 1920 by 1080, for example, where my view is narrowed to just one screen, and it made it so much more important. It made it so much more beneficial than on my double wide, and certainly than on the triples. So there was a difference, and I think that that's the other thing you have to take into consideration. If you're in triples, you're probably not lacking a lot of view angle, and it probably isn't nearly as important as if you're on a single monitor. And then in the case of my double monitor, I actually found it to be a really good fit. The combination together with the seamless monitor, it gave that double wide a little bit more width, if you know what I mean. So anytime you're thinking a double wide isn't quite wide enough, that little bit of movement is just enough to make it absolutely perfect. Well, I think that tells you everything that you need to know about the Delanclip Fusion Pro. And normally I would get right into the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, but I feel like I need to mention something before we even get into it. Normally when I'm using a piece of hardware and reviewing it, it is 100% built for sim racing, and when reviewing it, I'm looking through the eyes of a sim racer. And in this case, this piece of hardware goes well beyond sim racing, and I'd even dare say it works better outside of sim racing than it does in sim racing, so I kind of have to look at it through the eyes of a general gamer who might be doing flight sims or even shooter games as well as racing sims. But of course, this is a sim racing show, so we always do focus on sim racing as well. So now let's get down to the good, the not so good, and the bottom line, starting off with the good, and that being added immersion. works with most sims, affordable, does not require monster graphics card, much more accurate and fun than head turning with a button, lightweight, no dizziness or nausea, plug and play. And now on to the not so good, starting off with you have to move your head for it to turn your head in the game. Can be awkward at first. Must use headphones. Hard to get clip on headphones perfectly. Not good with motion systems. And now on to the bottom line. Towards the end of our good list, I mentioned no dizziness or nausea. So some people might be asking, well, is this a replacement for VR? And in some ways, it kind of parallels VR, but it's totally different at the same time. So you get that head tracking that you get with VR, which feels really natural, and it makes it so much more immersive than just standard fixed screens. And then it's so much more accurate than using a button or lever for turning your head in a sim. Now, at the same time, it does not give you that same in the cockpit feel of VR, but you don't have that added heat or nausea or other things associated with VR, and you definitely don't need to buy some super outrageous video card just to run it. It's going to work on any system just like that. I also noticed that the tracking is done so much better the more perfectly you have the unit mounted to your headphones. So I feel like if this is something that I was going to use all the time, that I would either 3D print a mount or use hot glue or find some way of mounting it to the headphones so that it never moved and that it stayed as aligned as I could possibly get it, because you're going to get better results. But if you're a more casual user, then the Velcro mounting is going to be fine, and it means you can take the unit off when you're not actually using it. Another thing I want to talk about is the fact that you're turning your head to activate it. It's not eye tracking. And when you think about racing, you are very restricted. And most of the time when we talk about looking to apex, most of it is done with the eyes, and then the head will follow. And this is a little bit reversed. It's your head will lead and your eyes will follow, or at least try to keep up with it. So it does take some training. And I actually found that I got the best use when I wasn't even thinking about it or trying to activate it. I found that I actually did naturally turn my head slightly, and that it was just barely pivoting the view, but then I had the ability to look left and right, and that was the added bonus. So it worked natural, and then when you wanted to look, you would do it with intention, but when you tried to focus on leading with your head, it actually felt a little awkward. And one more point that I feel is very important to make, and I'm not sure everybody will get the same experience that I do, but I find that I do some very weird things with my head when racing, and maybe if you watch me stream, you've seen this, but I do put a lot of body English into my driving style, and I also notice that I tend to crunch down lower and lower and tilt my head down and start to do some very weird behavior that I need to actually work on. So maybe I could use this for a training device. In addition, I noticed that I don't actually turn my head very level. I tend to do a weird tilt, and that was a little awkward, and that gets back to the final thing. Dialing in the sensitivities for the game you're playing are going to be critical to getting the most out of the Delanclip. When you just let it go wild, do too much, it will be a little hard to stay with. But when you get it just right, so I kind of mimicked that real life in the car feel, and the results were so much better when I took the time, and therefore I actually made a different profile for trucking versus iRacing versus even Assetto Corsa, and obviously a different profile for flying sims. Now, in closing, is the Delanclip for me? As a hardcore racer, I don't think that's the circumstance that I would use the Delanclip. Now, if you think of yourself as more of a sim driver, and it's about the experience of being in cars, you like to fire up your favorite car at the favorite track and just go out for some solo and experience the sight, the sound, everything but the fuel and the danger, you would really benefit from using the Delanclip. It's going to let you look around those interiors. You're going to get a better driving experience when you're not being super critical about tenths of second. In a racing situation, I need things to be super duper consistent, and I just didn't find it was that perfect for this. Now, on the other hand, if you're playing ATS, American Truck Simulator, or Euro Truck Simulator, This totally changed the game for me. I have been loving playing Truck Simulator lately, and being able to look around in the cab of the truck, being able to look over my shoulder instead of mapping controls to my wheel, just really made it feel like I was in the truck. It made it feel super duper natural, and it was so much easier to operate with efficiency than any map controls. So I really loved it. And then when it came to flight sims, and even though I only do flight sims for fun versus my everyday passion, this is an absolute must, because something about flying in a plane, you look around a lot more naturally. It's not so much leading with your eyes like a race car driver is. You're looking around, you're enjoying the sights, maybe the same with the truck. And it feels so perfect and so natural that I, again, would call it an absolute must. If you're doing flight sim or DCS or even some of the space simulators that are out there, you have to get head tracking. It's going to make the sim so much better than you ever imagined it could be. So I think that tells you everything that you need to know about the Delanclip Fusion Pro. I really enjoyed it on a lot of ways, and there are other ways where it just kind of left me wanting something a little more. Maybe perfected eye tracking is the way to really go, but I'm not sure that's quite perfected just yet. So if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you can find out when our next video comes out, and thank you for watching. This is the Simpit. I'm Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.